What happens when one of Hollywood's most respected actors walks onto a morning show, set expecting a conversation about his craft, only to be blindsided by a host more interested in controversy than conversation? In just 31 seconds of on-air tension, George Stephanopoulos would make a comment so shocking, so disrespectful, that it would push Samuel L. Jackson to do something he had never done before: walk off a live television interview. The morning started like any other at the Good Morning America studios in New York City. Samuel L. Jackson arrived early, as he always did, ready to promote his latest film. He had done hundreds of these interviews over his decades-long career. He knew the routine: smile for the cameras, answer questions about the movie, share a funny story or two, and be done in time for his next appointment. Simple, professional, respectful. But from the moment George Stephanopoulos walked onto the set, something felt different. There was an energy in the air, a tension that Samuel could not quite place. The producer had mentioned they wanted to discuss some recent comments Samuel had made about diversity in Hollywood, but he figured it would be a straightforward conversation. He had spoken honestly about the industry, about representation, about the struggles he and other actors of color had faced. Nothing controversial, just truth. The cameras went live, and George opened with a smile that did not quite reach his eyes. Welcome back, everyone. We have Samuel L. Jackson with us this morning. Samuel, thank you for being here. Thanks for having me, George, Samuel replied, settling into his chair. He could already sense something was off. George was not making eye contact the way hosts usually did. Instead, he was shuffling papers, glancing at notes, preparing for something. "So, your new film opens this weekend," George began, barely glancing at the promotional materials on the desk. "But I want to talk about something else first. You have been very vocal lately about Hollywood and race. Some might say you have been complaining quite a bit." Samuel's expression shifted slightly. Complaining? That was an interesting word choice. I would not call it complaining, George. I call it speaking the truth about an industry I have worked in for over 30 years. George leaned back in his chair, a slight smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. But is not Hollywood one of the most progressive industries out there? I mean, you have had quite a successful career. Does not that prove the system works? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Samuel took a breath, maintaining his composure. My success does not mean the system is perfect, George. It means I worked incredibly hard and got lucky in some ways. But for every one of me, there are dozens of talented actors who never got the same opportunities because of the color of their skin. That seems like a bit of an exaggeration, does not it? George interrupted, his tone dismissive. I think you might be seeing problems where they do not exist anymore. This is 2000 and something, not the 1960s. Samuel felt his jaw tighten. This was not a conversation. This was an ambush. George, with all due respect, you are a white man sitting in one of the most privileged positions in television. Maybe you are not the best person to tell me what problems do or do not exist for black actors in Hollywood. The studio went quiet. The crew members glanced at each other nervously. George's smile faded completely. I'm just trying to have an honest conversation here, Samuel. No need to get defensive. I'm not being defensive, Samuel replied, his voice calm but firm. I am being honest. You asked me on your show, presumably to talk about my work, and now you are questioning my lived experiences and dismissing very real issues in my industry. George shuffled his papers again, clearly preparing his next attack. Let me ask you this. Do you think maybe you are using race as an excuse? I mean, there are plenty of white actors who struggle too. Why does everything have to be about race with you? The question landed like a slap. Samuel stared at George for a long moment, processing what he had just heard. The crew members behind the cameras looked shocked. Even the other hosts at the desk appeared uncomfortable, shifting in their seats and avoiding eye contact. Did you really just ask me that? Samuel said slowly, his voice dangerously quiet. Did you really just suggest that I am using race as an excuse? George seemed to realize he had crossed a line, but instead of backing down, he doubled down. I am just asking the question that a lot of our viewers might be thinking. Why is it always about race? Can we not just talk about talent and hard work? We can talk about talent and hard work, Samuel replied, his composure still intact but clearly straining. But we also have to acknowledge the reality that talent and hard work are not always enough when you are fighting against systemic barriers. George, I have been acting since before you were in journalism. I have seen things, experience things that you cannot even imagine. And for you to sit there and suggest that I am playing some kind of race card is not just insulting, it is ignorant. The tension in the studio was now palpable. Other crew members had stopped what they were doing to watch the exchange. This was no longer a typical morning show interview. This was something else entirely. George, sensing he was losing control of the situation, tried a different approach. Look, Samuel, I am not trying to insult you. I am just trying to understand your perspective. But you have to admit, you have had an incredible career. You are one of the highest-grossing actors of all time. You have worked with the best directors in the business. Does not that count for something? Of course it counts for something, Samuel said, his patience clearly wearing thin. But my individual success does not erase the struggles of an entire community of artists. It does not change the fact that black actors are still typecast, still paid less, still given fewer opportunities. And it certainly does not give you the right to sit there and tell me that my experiences are not valid. George leaned forward, his expression hardening. I think you are being overly sensitive about this whole thing. Hollywood has changed a lot. Maybe you need to change with it instead of living in the past. That was it. That was the moment. Samuel sat perfectly still for a few seconds, his face unreadable. Then, very slowly, he removed his microphone. The clip made a soft sound as he unhooked it from his shirt. He placed it carefully on the desk in front of him. "What are you doing?" George asked, suddenly realizing what was happening. "I am done," Samuel said simply, standing up from his chair. "I came here to talk about my film, to have a respectful conversation. But you are not interested in conversation, George. You are interested in controversy. You want to provoke me, to get a reaction, to create a moment for your ratings? Well, congratulations, you got your moment." George's face flushed red. "Samuel, come on, sit back down. We can talk about the film." "No, we can not," Samuel replied, his voice steady and controlled, "because you already showed me who you are and what you think of me. You think I am complaining. You think I am making excuses. You think I am living in the past. You know what I think, George? I think you have no idea what you are talking about, and I think you invited me here just to tear me down." The other hosts at the desk remained silent, clearly unsure of how to intervene. The producers in the control room were likely panicking, trying to figure out how to salvage the situation. But Samuel was past caring about their concerns. "You need to sit down," George said, his voice taking on a commanding tone. "You are being unprofessional." Samuel let out a short, humorless laugh. "I am being unprofessional? George, you just spent the last several minutes questioning my integrity, dismissing my experiences, and suggesting that I am using race as an excuse. And you have the audacity to call me unprofessional? I was asking legitimate questions," George shot back, his own composure starting to crack. "Questions that need to be asked. Just because you do not like them does not mean they are not valid. There is a difference between asking tough questions and being disrespectful," Samuel countered. "You crossed that line about 5 minutes ago. Maybe nobody has ever called you out on it before, but I am calling you out now. The way you spoke to me was condescending, dismissive, and honestly, it was racist." The word hung in the air like a bomb. George's eyes went wide. "That is ridiculous. I'm not a racist. How dare you suggest that?" "I did not call you a racist," Samuel clarified, his voice ice cold now. "I said the way you spoke to me was racist. There is a difference. But the fact that you immediately got defensive instead of considering why I might feel that way tells me everything I need to know." George stood up now too, his face flushed with anger. "You cannot just throw that word around, Samuel. You cannot just accuse people of racism because they disagree with you. I am not accusing you of anything," Samuel said, gathering his jacket from the back of his chair. "I am telling you how your words and your tone made me feel. And I am telling you that I will not sit here and be disrespected on live television. I have too much self-respect for that." One of the producers finally rushed onto the set, trying to mediate. "Guys, please, let us take a break. We can work this out." But Samuel was already walking toward the exit. George, however, was not done. "If you walk out of here, you are proving my point. You are showing that you cannot handle tough questions. You are running away." Samuel stopped in his tracks and turned around slowly. The look on his face was one of complete disbelief. "You think this is about me not being able to handle tough questions? George, I have given interviews to journalists who actually knew what they were talking about. I have sat down with people who challenged me with intelligence and respect. What you did here today was not tough journalism. It was lazy, provocative, and designed to make me look bad. So no, I am not running away. I am choosing not to participate in your circus. You are making a huge mistake, George said, his voice shaking now with barely contained anger. Walking off this show is going to make you look terrible. You know what would make me look terrible? Samuel replied. Sitting here and letting you talk to me like I am some kind of problem that needs to be solved? Letting you minimize my experiences and the experiences of countless other black artists. That would make me look terrible. Walking away from disrespect? That makes me look like someone who knows his worth. George took a step closer, pointing his finger at Samuel. You are being incredibly ungrateful right now. Do you know how many actors would kill to be on this show? And there it was. The entitlement, the arrogance, the belief that Samuel should be grateful just for the opportunity to be insulted on national television. Samuel smiled, but it was not a friendly smile. Ungrateful? George, you did not do me a favor by having me on your show. I did you a favor by agreeing to come here. My presence brings viewers. My name brings credibility. And you just threw all of that away because you wanted to play some kind of gotcha game with me. That is not what I was doing, George protested, but his voice lacked conviction now. Yes, it was, Samuel said. From the moment I sat down, you had an agenda. You wanted to make me the angry black man. You wanted to provoke me into losing my temper so you could have your viral moment. Well, I am not going to give you that satisfaction. I am walking out of here with my dignity intact, which is more than I can say for you. George's face was now bright red and his hands were shaking. You cannot talk to me like that. This is my show. And that is the problem, Samuel said quietly. You think because this is your show, you can treat your guests however you want. You think you are entitled to respect just because you have a desk and a camera? But respect is earned, George, and you did not earn mine today. The producer tried one more time to intervene. Samuel, please, let us just take a moment to cool down. But Samuel shook his head. There is nothing to cool down from. I am perfectly calm. I am just done. Done with this interview, done with this disrespect, and done with people like George who think they can talk down to me because I am willing to speak truth about my industry. George, realizing he had completely lost control of the situation, made one final, desperate attempt to save face. Fine, walk out. But do not expect to be invited back on this show. Do not expect any morning show to have you on after this. You just burned a lot of bridges, Samuel. Samuel paused at the edge of the set and looked back at George one last time. George, I've been in this business long enough to know that bridges are only worth keeping if they lead somewhere good. This bridge, it was not worth keeping. And as for other morning shows, trust me, they will be calling. Because unlike you, they know how to treat their guests with respect. And with that, Samuel L. Jackson walked off the Good Morning America set, leaving George Stephanopoulos standing there in stunned silence. The camera still rolling, capturing every moment of his humiliation. The studio remained eerily quiet as the crew processed what had just happened. The other hosts at the desk sat frozen, unsure of what to say or do. George slowly sank back into his chair, his face still flushed, his hands still trembling. He had invited one of Hollywood's biggest stars onto his show, and within minutes, he had managed to not only offend him, but drive him away entirely. As Samuel walked through the backstage area, crew members stepped aside, some nodding respectfully, others looking away awkwardly. He could hear the frantic voices of producers behind him, trying to figure out how to handle the rest of the show, how to explain what had just happened to their viewers, how to spin this disaster into something salvageable. But Samuel did not look back. He had said what needed to be said. He had drawn his line in the sand. And he had walked away with his head held high, refusing to be diminished by someone who had clearly underestimated him. Back on the set, George tried to regain his composure, shuffling his papers again, that nervous habit that betrayed his anxiety. One of the other hosts leaned over and whispered something to him, probably trying to offer support or figure out how they should proceed. But George barely seemed to hear. He was staring at the empty chair where Samuel had been sitting just moments before, perhaps finally realizing the magnitude of what had just transpired. The producer counted down in his ear, signaling that they would be coming back from commercial in 30 seconds. George straightened his tie, cleared his throat, and tried to arrange his face into something resembling professional composure. But anyone watching could see the cracks. The way his smile did not quite work, the way his eyes kept darting to that empty chair, the way his voice wavered just slightly when he finally spoke. "We are back," he said, trying to sound casual, trying to pretend that nothing unusual had just happened. "As you may have noticed, Samuel L. Jackson has left the show. We apologize for that unexpected turn of events." But the apology rang hollow because everyone watching knew the truth. They had seen the entire exchange. They had watched George provoke, dismiss, and disrespect his guest until that guest had no choice but to leave. They had seen the entitlement, the arrogance, the complete lack of awareness, and they had seen Samuel L. Jackson, a man with decades of experience and success, refuse to tolerate it, refuse to sit there and smile and play along with a game designed to make him look bad, refuse to let anyone, no matter how powerful or well-known, treat him as anything less than the professional and artist he had earned the right to be called. The interview that was supposed to be a simple promotion for a new film had instead become something else entirely. A moment of confrontation, a moment of truth, a moment when one man stood up for himself and his community, and another man revealed exactly who he was when challenged. As Samuel left the building and stepped out into the New York morning, he took a deep breath of fresh air. His phone was already buzzing with calls and texts, probably from his publicist, his manager, his friends in the industry. Everyone would want to know what happened, why he walked out, whether he was okay. But Samuel was more than okay. He was at peace with his decision, because sometimes walking away is not about running from something. It is about walking towards your own dignity, your own self-respect, your own truth. And no television show, no matter how popular or prestigious, was worth sacrificing that. The cameras back in the studio were still rolling, but Samuel L. Jackson was already gone, leaving behind only the echo of his words and the weight of his absence. A reminder that respect is not negotiable, that dignity is not for sale, and that some bridges are meant to be burned when they lead to places that diminish rather than elevate. George Stephanopoulos sat at his desk, trying to continue with the show, trying to pretend that everything was fine, but everyone could see the truth. In trying to create a memorable moment, he had succeeded, just not in the way he had intended. He had not made Samuel look bad. He had made himself look small, entitled, and completely out of touch. And that was a legacy that no amount of spin could change.